Welcome to Bene Naras, where we discuss all things Latin and writing and books.
I'm Rachel Cunning, and I live on the mountain, and the mountain. I live on a mountain, and I spent the morning doing fire mitigation work on the mountain.
I am Arianne Belzer-Carroll, and I don't live on a mountain. But if we're talking fire, I do have burned fingertips from making 22 crepes this morning.
Some high frequency crepes. Also, I didn't get any.
No, you didn't. But you also didn't get the high frequency burned fingertips.
This is true.
And in a very good segue, today's story is about choosing your words in a high frequency kind of way. And not in the unpleasant, like, how shall I respond to this person? Let me choose
my last email.
Right. But in the, I'd like to write a comprehensible novella that uses high frequency words in Latin kind of way. It's really so important to use high frequency vocabulary. And when we say high frequency, we mean the words that show up most frequently in the language. In English, for example, is a higher frequency word than turpitude, for example. There are several frequency lists that differ in content based on which texts they were working through. So, for example, if they rely on Cicero, the frequency list is going to look different than if they're relying on Sepulveda. And most of them are limited to classical Latin or rely more on classical Latin than on medieval Latin. So that's going to make a difference. And it's something to be aware of. It's really important to rely on high frequency vocab because those are the words that students are going to encounter the most frequently. And if we are introducing them to funky and irregular words up front, like Pharaoh, then they get way more comfortable with those, than if we hold off on them and then try to hit them with them later.
Yes, and we want our kids to be able to read Latin and to read thus the vocabulary that is used most often in Latin. In Wheelock, Wolo and Nolo and Ao are introduced at like the very end of the book. And our kids in Latin 1 know how to use those words, and they don't know that it's weird because we introduce them early so we can be preparing them to read that literature. So
they're so high frequency.
Yeah, they really are. So it's more important for them to be exposed to those words like Pharaoh early on. And so I want to show off the word frequency list that I use most often, and it is the Dickinson College Commentaries, aka the DCC. And I'm going to share my screen, hopefully very successfully here in a moment. Behold, the DCC. And I love this list. It has 1,000 words on it. So when you first come to this website, this is what it looks like. And and is the most common word in Latin, followed by sum and qui quod, which is critical. So there are a couple different ways to use this. You can search by head word, which I'm going to come back to. You can filter by part of speech. So I felt like I had gotten very stuck in my adverb usage. So you could click on adverb and filter it out by hitting apply. And behold, the most common. I was really stuck. And I was like, I need to spice up my writing somewhere and do something different, both for myself and for students. So that's cool. And that's a way that I've used it. If you're also trying to figure out which words you want to teach your kids and you want to make sure you're hitting different conjugations and declensions, you can also search by grammar. But what I really like is filtering by semantic group, because you can see, like, if you're going to be writing about the body, we had a whole unit on body parts and monsters, and it was a really fun unit, by the way, top notch. You can see which body parts are the most important for your kids to know, because they're the most common in Latin literature. So you have hand or band of men, body, head, mouth, face. Weirdly, I
Raise
discovered
your
that
hand if
foot
you never teach
is,
Woltus. Sorry, go ahead.
um, no, I recently discovered when I was looking at these lists that foot is more common than girl. Right. Yeah, if you had that face, that was the face I made when I was like, what? What do you mean it's more common than Puella? So I love this list for those reasons. There are other really useful things for this. So if you search the head word, fortasse, nothing comes up. And you go, how is that possible?
Spoiler, it
Well,
is on the list.
spoiler, yes. What happens is that it searches like that first form. And so if you use Control Find and you search for Fritasa, there it is. It's number 833 on the list.
So like by the same token, you won't find Kwai by using the search head word.
Yes. So, and there are other words where it's a problem too. But this is also why I really like to do Control Find, and then you type in Fortassa and you hit Enter, or not Enter, but like the little down arrow, and there it is. And it doesn't appear because it comes second. Ta-da! And then it's the same thing, like some of the words are combined, like philia and philius. So if you search for sun, you're going to be like, what do you mean sun's not on the high frequency list? Surely it is. And it is. But I find this really useful when I'm looking for synonyms. And I'm going to show you two great examples real quick. So sometimes when we're writing, we choose things that we think will be grammatically easier rather than something that is actually high frequency in literature. So let's look at foetus. Foetus means like foul, ugly, and it's 922. But it's, and it was probably chosen because it's the first and second declension adjective. But turpis, ugly, insightful, disgraceful, is 377. And that is a huge range in frequency difference. By a similar token, Porto is often taught because it's a beautiful first conjugation.
And transport, I mean, you have other words in English that come from that, which is handy, but not a frequency thing.
Yeah, and so this is 853. But if you teach your kids Pharaoh from the very beginning, you are teaching them the 45th most common word in Latin literature. And it's irregular, so that's huge. If you teach it late, like they're gonna be like Porto, and you're like, yeah. So teaching it earlier is much better. It also has fun other meanings like endure, but yeah.
Well,
so
there are so many other words that are pharaoh, apharaoh and epharaoh and infaraoh and depharaoh, and it is a building block, which isn't to say don't teach portare. Like, do teach portare. If you have to make the choice, pick the higher frequency one.
Teach pharaoh.
Right.
Yep. And if you are writing a book, teach the one that, and write with the one that is going to be helping your end goal, which would be reading Latin literature.
Right. And I do think that it's worth noting that there are some shades of meaning here. There may be times that you legit do want portare and not pharaoh.
Right.
Like when you want the image of somebody picking up and carrying something instead of bringing it. And it's really worthwhile to say, no, this is the word that I want.
Right.
But sometimes you don't. And when you don't need that shade of meaning, default to the one.
Yes, exactly.
Some words can feel high frequency because your textbook uses them. Check a frequency list. It'll tell you how word that frequent actually is. Sometimes textbooks don't actually make wise vocab choices. We rely on them to do that, and sometimes they fail us. Flaira is actually higher frequency than lacrimare, despite the fact that Cambridge seems to think otherwise.
Right, and that is a hill that I die on, that lacrimare versus flaire is, because lacrimare doesn't make the list at all.
No, it doesn't.
Period. But fleo does, so that's why I write with it. So at this point, you might in fact be contemplating your life choices about writing and saying, why would I ever do this? Because you want me to look at every single word, like, and then like
That's not a forever situation.
Right. And my honest response would be I would encourage you to do it, because I didn't know that Lacrimo didn't make the list and Fleo did until I looked it up. I learned a lot by looking up all the words in my list, like that I had used in my novella in the list. And then, since our goal is to limit the vocabulary anyway, it's not like you're looking up every word in an English novel. You're looking up 100, maybe 200, maybe 300 words. And
Frankly,
I found it
probably with,
incredibly...
like, you don't have to look up esse. You're not going to look up in. You're not going to look up, like, qui. So sometimes we trust our guts and we say, et is probably frequent enough that I don't have to check.
Right. And I still look up every word, because I think it's useful information for me. It's useful information for me to provide to teachers. So when I provide a dictionary, I let them know, like, here's how frequent the word is that I'm like pulling out to use in this novella, because teachers might want to know that they're picking novellas that have high frequency vocab. So that's why I do it. And the first time you do it, I encourage you to bite the bullet and do it. Spend some time with it.
Well, and if you've done it for the first one, you'll have a better sense of what is frequent and what isn't, and you will do much less looking up in the future. The first one is always tougher. Part of writing a novella is thinking really critically about your own working vocab. Remember that you're not writing for your students. Think about what your working idiom is and what is probably actually high frequency. I say wa all the time, including in English. I am not going to assume that other people's students know that word, even though mine do. This isn't about me. It's about a general accessibility. And you probably also have a gut sense of what words are more or less frequent. You've read stuff that isn't Cambridge or Oxford or Ecce. If your brain pings a little bit and it says, I see hortus in my textbook a lot, but I wonder if it's high frequency, go check a frequency list. Spoiler, hortus does not make the list. And I use it anyway. And I use it anyway because it is broadly useful. And also because there's something of a difference, I think, between ancient high frequency and classroom high frequency. Culina doesn't make the list either. I would assume that a high proportion of Latin students probably know the word culina. There are some concessions worth making for that. Assume that nobody knows any idioms at all. Gloss all the idioms, all of them. If you use any idiom, gloss it. Sometimes, as I'm writing, I will think, ugh, I could use the word tamen. I wonder if I have already used the word tamen. And so I control F tamen in my own work to find out if I've already had that thought and used it. And sometimes I'll find that I have used it 4 times, which isn't enough, and which we're going to talk about in a minute. So then I put that on a sticky note. You can use Trello for that. You can use like the stickies function that your computer has, or you can use like legit sticky notes for this. And I label it kill or increase with the title of the book that I'm writing. And that's a good reminder to me that I have an issue with that word. So if I really, really want the word saivos or the word tamen, then I need to remember to be using it.
And other times I am trying desperately to avoid writing a word because I'm trying to be really mindful of word count. And then I write myself into a corner where it's just gotten really awkward and I just need to add the word. So I tried not to use the word Terra and Pegasus and Bellerophon, and there were just multiple times where it was weird not to have Terra. And so I went back and added it to all those sections where I tried to avoid writing it, and it just made it a lot cleaner to go ahead and have it, even though I don't use it much in my story. I ended up really kind of wanting and needing to use it.
Yeah, and if having to talk around a word is actually going to make it less comprehensible, which does happen, use the word. And if your brain says to you 14 different times, I really wish we had autem, you should have it.